A poor little girl gives a drawing to the young billionaire. What he discovers when he looks at it moves everyone. Reed Silas parked his car on the narrow street and looked out the window at the small, weathered brick building. Hope Community Center, announced the simple sign above the entrance. He adjusted his tie, an automatic gesture for someone uncomfortable outside the corporate environment. 15 minutes, he muttered to himself. I just need to sign the donation papers and leave. The donation to the community daycare was the marketing department's idea. Social responsibility, they had said. Good publicity, Reed mentally translated. Not that he cared. Silas Enterprises had more than enough money, and the children certainly needed it more than he did. The smell of paint and modeling clay hit Reed as soon as he opened the door. Children's laughter echoed down the hallway, which was decorated with colorful drawings taped to the walls. A woman with gray hair and a warm smile came to greet him. Mr. Silas. What a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Martha, the coordinator. Your donation is going to make such a difference for our children. Reed offered a rehearsed smile, the same one he used in business meetings. It's a pleasure to be here. Would you like to meet the children before we sign the documents? They're very excited about your visit. The question caught him off guard. The plan was to get in, sign, and get out. No complications, no unnecessary interactions, especially not with children. I really don't. Please, Mr. Silas, it's just a few minutes. It would mean so much to them. Something in her eyes stopped him from refusing. Reed nodded, resigned, and followed Martha down a hallway to a large room where about 20 children were busy with various toys and activities. Children, this is Mr. Silas. He's the one who is helping our daycare get new books and toys. 20 pairs of curious eyes turned to him. Reed swallowed hard. Numbers, spreadsheets, and contracts were his territory. Not little humans with runny noses and paint-stained hands. One little girl stood out from the group, small, with blonde hair in 2 uneven braids and bright, attentive eyes. She was carrying a sheet of paper, as carefully as if it were a treasure. Hello, Reed said, uncomfortably. The girl stopped in front of him, studying his face with a surprising intensity for someone so young. My name is Josie, she announced with the characteristic confidence of a 5-year-old. I'm 5.5. I made a drawing. She held the paper out to him, a gesture so determined that Reed found himself accepting it without thinking. The drawing was like any other made by a child. Simple lines, vibrant colors, and impossible proportions. A house, a woman with long hair, a child holding hands with a tall male figure, and a smiling sun in the corner. It's very nice, Reed commented automatically, trying to hand the paper back. Josie refused with a shake of her head. I made this drawing for you, she exclaimed with enthusiasm. Her bright eyes shone as she pointed to the male figure on the paper. You remind me of my daddy. Her voice softened. She brought her small hand to her own chest. He's in heaven, but I feel him here. She pointed to her heart with unshakable certainty. The words hung in the air, simple, direct, and for some reason Reed couldn't comprehend devastating. Josie, dear, don't bother Mr. Silas, Martha intervened, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. It's no bother, Reed heard his own voice say, distantly. His eyes couldn't leave the child's face. Was there something familiar about her? In the dimples that appeared when she smiled, the shape of her eyes. It was impossible. Reed didn't even have family besides his adoptive parents in another state, with whom he barely spoke. Do you want to see my rock collection? Josie asked, already pulling his hand. Before he knew it, Reed was sitting in a chair far too small for his body, while Josie proudly showed him 6 ordinary rocks that, in her imagination, were rare treasures. This one is magic. When you hold it and make a wish, it comes true, but it only works if you really believe. Reed held the plain grey rock. And what kind of wishes do you make? Josie's smile faded a little. I wished for my daddy to come back, but I guess I didn't believe hard enough. The tightness in Reed's chest intensified. And this one, she continued, showing another rock. I found it on my birthday. Mommy said it was a present from Daddy. For 20 minutes, Reed completely forgot about signing documents, pending meetings, and unanswered emails. He listened to stories about princesses, dragons, and an imaginary cat named Popcorn who only appeared when no one was looking. When he finally stood up to leave, he felt a strange emptiness. Martha walked him to the exit, papers signed and formalities completed. "Josie is a special child," Martha commented. "It's been hard since she lost her father. Her mother works 2 jobs, and they barely see each other during the week." Reed nodded, unable to articulate the confusing mix of feelings he was experiencing. "Thank you again for the donation, Mr. Silas." In the car, Reed looked at the crumpled drawing in his hands. The phrase echoed in his mind. "He looked just like you." Why did it affect him so much? Why did he feel an inexplicable connection to a child he had just met? Reed started the car and drove back to the office. But he knew something had changed. The feeling that there was a truth waiting to be discovered wouldn't leave him. "You remind me of my daddy." The sentence seemed simple. Kids say things like that all the time, don't they? They confuse faces, make up stories, imagine connections. So why had those words pierced so deeply through an armor he didn't even know he was wearing? Reed had no answers. Not yet. But for the first time in years, he felt an urgency that wasn't related to business or money. And he knew he would be back at that daycare tomorrow. Reed couldn't sleep. The image of the blonde girl with bright eyes and her words haunted him all night. He tossed and turned in the king-size bed of his spacious, yet strangely empty, apartment. By morning, he had made up his mind. He cancelled 2 meetings, something he had never done before. Janet, his assistant of 5 years, stared at him in surprise when he announced he would be out for a few hours. "Is everything all right, Mr. Silas?" "Yes, just a personal matter," he replied, noticing how the word personal sounded strange on his lips. How many truly personal commitments had he had in recent years? He couldn't remember any. The day was sunny, unlike the one before. Reed drove with the windows down, feeling the breeze on his face. The Hope Community Center looked more welcoming in the morning light. Or maybe it was just his perception that had changed. Martha greeted him with a surprised smile. "Mr. Silas, we weren't expecting to see you again so soon. He hesitated, realizing he hadn't planned an explanation. "I wanted to see how the children are using the new materials." Of course. They're on the playground now. It's snack time. And then they'll have free time." Reed walked down the hallway, passing small but organized rooms. Light streamed through the windows, illuminating colorful drawings and alphabets on the walls. He reached the playground, a modest space with a few toys and a covered area with tables for meals. 20 pairs of eyes turned to him, and then a cry of joy. "Mr. Reed!" Josie ran towards him, her blonde hair bouncing with each step, a huge smile lighting up her face. She stopped just a few inches from him, as if suddenly remembering some rule of conduct. "You came back!" The sincerity of her joy completely disarmed him. When was the last time someone was genuinely happy to see him? "I came back," he confirmed, surprised by the smile that appeared on his own face. A real smile, not the rehearsed one he used at corporate events. "Want to see my snack? I have chocolate chip cookies." Josie took his hand without hesitation and led him to one of the tables where she was sitting. Reed sat awkwardly on the small bench beside her, his long legs barely fitting under the table. Josie opened her unicorn lunchbox and proudly showed off her treasure, 4 slightly broken chocolate chip cookies. "My mom made them last night. Want one?" Reed accepted the offered cookie, noticing it was homemade. He took a bite, tasting the simple, sweet flavor. "It's delicious. Mommy makes the best cookies in the world," Josie declared with absolute conviction. "Daddy used to say she could open a cookie shop and get rich." The mention of her father created a small pause. Reed watched Josie's face, how her bright eyes momentarily lost a bit of their sparkle. "Did your dad like cookies a lot?" Josie nodded vigorously. "He ate a whole bunch, and then he'd complain that his pants wouldn't close. Mommy would laugh at him." Martha approached with a pitcher of juice. "Mr. Silas, would you like some orange juice?" "It's fresh," Reed accepted, drinking the juice from a small, colorful plastic cup. He noticed Martha watching his interaction with Josie with curiosity. "Mr. Reed is my friend now," Josie informed the coordinator seriously. "He liked my drawing." I see you two are getting along well, Martha commented with a gentle smile. And Josie, when you finish your snack, you can show Mr. Silas our new reading corner that was bought with his donation. When Martha moved away to attend to another child, Josie leaned in as if sharing a secret. Do you want to know more about my daddy? Reed felt a shiver run down his spine. I'd like that very much. His name was Joel, and it's been a year since he went to heaven. Josie fiddled with the edge of her napkin as she spoke. Mommy said it was a car accident. A bad man was driving too fast and hit Daddy's car. The simplicity with which she described the tragedy made Reed's heart ache. I'm so sorry, Josie. Everything's been different since then, she continued, her voice suddenly small. The mommy has to work a lot. She works at an office during the day and at a restaurant at night. She comes home tired, and sometimes, when she thinks I'm sleeping, I hear her crying. Josie looked up at Reed. Mommy cries when she thinks I'm not looking. We miss him so much. Reed swallowed hard, unable to find the right words. Before he would make coffee, help with my bath and tell jokes at dinner, Josie continued. He knew tons of jokes, like, why did the Scarecrow win an award? Why? Because he was outstanding in his field. Josie giggled at her own joke, a crystalline sound that contrasted with the sadness of moments before. Reed laughed too, not so much at the joke itself, but at the joy on her face. Did your dad tell that joke? All the time. Mommy would pretend to be mad, but she'd laugh too. Daddy used to say that laughing is the best medicine for everything. The other children began to disperse across the playground to play. Josie remained seated, looking at Reed as if he were a fascinating puzzle. Do you have kids, Mr. Reed? The question caught him by surprise. No, I don't. Why not? The simplicity of the question disconcerted him. Why not, indeed? He had never really considered the idea. He was always busy building his company, making money, expanding his business. So I guess I never found the right time, he finally answered. Josie considered the answer seriously. Daddy used to say that having a family is the best thing in the world, better than chocolate. Reed smiled. Your dad sounds like he was a very wise man. He was the wisest of all, Josie said with the absolute certainty of a child. He knew how to fix everything. When my bear lost its arm, he sewed it back on. And when the shower broke, he fixed it with a special tool. Reed listened intently, absorbing every little detail about this man he didn't know, but who, for some reason, seemed important. Your mom must miss him very much, Josie lowered her voice. She keeps his shirt under her pillow. She thinks I don't know, but I saw it, and sometimes she talks to his picture on the nightstand. The weight of that family's grief fell on Reed like an avalanche, an overworked mother trying to be strong for her daughter, a 5-year-old girl trying to understand why her father wasn't coming home. Do you have a picture of him? Reed asked, feeling a curiosity he couldn't explain. I'd like to see what he looked like. Josie shook her head. Not here, but I have one at home. Could you bring it tomorrow? I'd really like to see it. Josie studied him for a moment, as if assessing whether she could trust him with something so precious. Are you coming back tomorrow? If you want me to. Her face lit up. I do. Then I'll be back. Promise. Her bright eyes stared at him intensely, as if this were the most important promise in the world. Reed felt the weight of that moment. For Josie, maybe it was. How many broken promises had a child who lost her father already experienced? I promise, Josie. She smiled, satisfied. Come back tomorrow and I'll show you. Mommy lets me bring a picture in my backpack, but I have to take very good care of it. I'll treat it like a treasure, Reed assured her. It is a treasure, Josie agreed seriously. It's my favorite treasure. Reed spent another hour with Josie, visiting the new reading corner and hearing about her favorite stories. He discovered that she loved stories about princesses who saved princes, not the other way around. He discovered that she knew how to recite the alphabet backward because her father had taught her. Small fragments of a life he had never imagined. When it was time to leave, he felt a reluctance he hadn't expected. I have to go back to work now, Josie. She nodded, understanding beyond her years. Grown-ups always have to work. Daddy worked a lot too, but he always came back to us. The words were like an arrow straight to his heart. Reed leaned down, getting to her level. I'll be back tomorrow, I promised. Remember? I remember, she smiled, confident. And I'll bring the picture. On the way back to the office, Reed felt something strange in his chest, a weight, but different from anything he had ever felt. It was the void left by someone he had never known. The pain of the absence of a father that a little blonde girl felt every day. For the first time in years, the meetings seemed unimportant. The emails could wait. The financial decisions seemed distant. Reed spent the rest of the day distracted, his mind constantly returning to Josie and her story. Janet noticed the change but didn't comment. She just rearranged his schedule when he informed her he would be leaving early the next day. At night, in his silent apartment, Reed looked around and realized how empty his life was. Expensive furniture, but with no signs of use. A fridge with ready-made meals and bottles of expensive wine. No pictures on the walls, nothing of sentimental value. For the first time, he felt uneasy with the emptiness, with the lack of connections, with the lack of purpose beyond accumulating more money. The next morning, Reed arrived at the daycare early. Martha was already waiting for him, with a smile that suggested she understood more than she was saying. She arrived 10 minutes ago, she informed him. She hasn't stopped talking about your visit yesterday. She brought a backpack full of things to show you. Reed felt a warmth in his chest upon hearing this. Thank you for allowing my visits. Mr. Silas, I've rarely seen Josie so excited since... Martha hesitated. Well, since she lost her father. You're doing her good. Reed nodded, unable to explain that perhaps Josie was doing even more good for him. Her mother, Elena, brought her in today. Usually, it's the babysitter who drops her off while Elena goes to work. She asked about you. Reed felt a pang of anxiety. What did you say? Just the truth. That you made a generous donation and have shown an interest in the well-being of all the children. Martha smiled. She seemed relieved to know that Josie has made a new friend. When he entered the main room, Josie was already waiting, sitting in a small chair, swinging her legs anxiously. Upon seeing him, her face lit up. You really came. I promised, didn't I? Reed smiled, sitting down beside her. Josie opened her backpack with careful, reverent movements. Besides the photograph, there were drawings, a small colored stone, Daddy's lucky rock, and even a small plastic dinosaur. It was his favorite. From a notebook covered in colored paper, she finally took out a photograph. She held it for a moment, as if hesitant to share something so precious. This is my favorite picture, she said at last, holding it out to Reed. It's from my 4th birthday, just before Daddy went to heaven. Reed took the photograph carefully. It was a slightly faded image, showing a happy family around a children's birthday cake. A beautiful woman with dark hair smiled next to Josie, who was wearing a colorful party hat. And next to them, Reed froze. The blood seemed to drain from his face. The man in the picture, Joel, was identical to him. Not just a casual resemblance, as sometimes happens between strangers. It was like looking in a mirror. The same face shape, the same nose, even the slightly crooked smile to one side. The only noticeable difference was that Joel wore his hair a bit longer and had a short beard that Reed did not. Josie. His voice failed. Your father. See? I told you he looked just like you, Josie exclaimed, not noticing the shock on Reed's face. Everyone says I look like Mommy, but I have Daddy's eyes. She pointed to her own bright eyes, then to the man's in the photo. The same eyes Reed saw every morning in the mirror. What was your father's full name? Reed asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Joel Silas, Josie replied, taking the photo back and holding it affectionately. He was the best dad in the world, Silas. The same last name. It couldn't be a coincidence. And did he have any brothers or sisters? The question escaped his lips almost involuntarily. Josie shook her head. He said it was just him and Grandma Nora. But Grandma lives far away now. Reed felt the room spin. His mind raced with possibilities, questions, theories. Who was Joel really? Who was Nora, and how did he, Reed, fit into this story? He said he was going to teach me everything, Josie continued, running her small fingers over her father's image. How to ride a bike, and swim, and do hard math. Her voice grew quieter. but he left too soon. Reed felt an overwhelming emotion swell inside him. A mix of shock, confusion, and an inexplicable sadness for someone he had never met, but who was somehow connected to him. He told me, before he went to heaven, that I would be the smartest girl in school, and that even when he wasn't here, he would always be looking out for me. Josie hugged the photo against her chest. "Do you think he can see me from heaven?" Reed felt a lump in his throat. "I'm sure he can, Josie." In that moment, something awakened inside Reed. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just compassion for a child who had lost her father. It was a deep, visceral impulse, a call he couldn't ignore. He needed to know more. He needed to understand this impossible connection. And more than that, he needed to do something. For the first time in his life, Reed Silas felt there was something far more important than contracts and profits. There was a little girl with eyes just like his who had lost a father identical to him, and somehow, he knew his life would never be the same. Reed drove for 3 hours without stopping. The road to his parents' house was long and monotonous, but he barely noticed the scenery. His mind was filled with questions that needed answers. The rental car parked in front of the suburban house where he grew up. 2 stories, a well-kept garden, a 2-car garage. The same house as always, but today it seemed different, as if it held secrets he had never noticed. Margaret and Thomas Silas greeted him with surprise. Unannounced visits were not Reed's style. "Son, what a wonderful surprise." His mother hugged him tightly. "Why didn't you let us know you were coming? I would have made your favorite cake." Reed accepted the hug but couldn't return it with the same enthusiasm. "I needed to talk to you, in person." His father, always more reserved, watched his son attentively. "Is something wrong with the business?" "No, it's personal." The 3 of them sat in the familiar living room. The same beige sofa, the same photos on the walls. Reed at graduation, Reed receiving awards, Reed at his first company, a life carefully documented. Reed took a deep breath. There was no easy way to ask the question, "I need to know about my adoption." The silence that followed was heavy, almost tangible. Margaret looked at Thomas, a silent conversation passing between them. "Why now, after all these years?" his father finally asked. Reed took Joel's photo from his pocket. He placed it on the coffee table. "Because I found this man. Or rather, I found his daughter." Margaret picked up the photo with trembling hands. Her face turned pale. "My God, it's like looking at you." His name was Joel Silas. He died a year ago in a car accident. He left behind a 5-year-old daughter named Josie. Thomas adjusted his glasses, examining the photo more closely. "There's no doubt about the resemblance. Why did you never tell me the truth?" The question came out more bitter than Reed intended. "Why keep it a secret?" Margaret held her husband's hand. "It wasn't a secret, Reed. We always knew we would have this conversation one day. We just never found the right time." "And when would the right time have been?" "When I was 50, 60, Thomas sighed. "You were always so focused, so determined. In school, in business. You never showed any interest in your past." Reed felt a pang of guilt. It was true, he had never asked. He always looked forward, never back. "Tell me everything. Now." Margaret stood up, left the room, and returned with an old shoebox. She sat down again, placing the box on her lap. "You were only 3 days old when you came to us. We were volunteers at the state orphanage. We had been trying to have children for years." Her voice trembled slightly. "When the social worker called us saying there was a newborn baby, we knew it was our moment." She opened the box, revealing a yellowed envelope, a pair of tiny socks, and a hospital identification bracelet. "This is all you came with." There was no letter, no names of your biological parents. Reed picked up the bracelet. It was so small it barely fit on his finger. "So there are no records?" Thomas shook his head. "Just the basics. You were left on the orphanage's doorstep during the night. The social worker estimated you were 3 days old. You were well cared for, clean, fed. Whoever left you did it with a lot of love and probably a lot of pain." Reed opened the envelope. Inside, there was only an official admission form to the orphanage, dated May 12, 1987. In the description, a single line, newborn, left at the door. And the last name, Silas? We gave it to you, Thomas replied. So your name on the record was just Baby Doe. Reed felt a void grow inside him. There was no story, no connection, just a blank page. And was there never any attempt at contact? Did no one look for me? Margaret shook her head. Never. But the adoption process was completely legal. We waited the required period. We did everything according to the law. Reed looked at Joel's photo again, and now I find out I have had a brother. Perhaps a twin brother. Given the resemblance, Thomas observed. The idea hit Reed like a punch. Twins, separated at birth. One adopted by a middle-class family, the other perhaps raised by their biological mother. Two lives that never crossed out until now. I need to go to the orphanage, see if there are more records. Son, Margaret touched his arm. That place closed down 10 years ago. The records must be in the state archives now. Reed stood up, determined. Then that's where I'm going. The state archives was a grey, impersonal building. Reed waited for 3 hours until an employee brought the box with the records from the old St. Clair's orphanage. The file with his name was thin, containing only the same form his parents kept, plus a few adoption documents. Nothing new, no clues. On impulse, he asked to check records from the same date or nearby, looking for another baby. There was nothing. Sometimes abandoned babies were registered at different institutions, even if left in the same place, the archivist explained. It depended on the availability of spots. Reed felt his frustration grow. So there's no way to know. Unless you have the biological mother's name, it's almost impossible to track. Reed closed his eyes for a moment. The image of Josie came to his mind, her bright eyes, so much like his. The drawing she had made, her smile when she saw him return. Thank you for your time, he said, handing the file back. On his way out, Reed looked up at the sky. The sun was beginning to set, painting the horizon orange and pink. Somewhere in the city, Josie was probably having dinner with her mother, telling her about her day, maybe talking about the man who looked so much like her father. He took out his phone. He called Janet. I need you to find everything you can on a Joel Silas and birth, school, work, anything, and also on his mother. Her name is Nora. Is this for a business deal? Janet asked, confused by the unusual request. No, it's personal, very personal. Reed hung up and stood for a moment, absorbing everything. His entire life had been built on a blank page, a dry record that only said, newborn, left at the door. No ties, no name, just absence. But now for the first time there was something concrete. A name, a connection. Joel Silas, his brother. A man he would never know, but whose blood ran in the veins of a little girl with bright eyes. Josie, his niece. Reed felt a new determination grow inside him. Maybe he would never uncover the whole story. Maybe the details would remain forever in the shadows. But now he had something real, a bond that transcended papers and records. He had his brother's name and his daughter. That changed everything. The rental car picked up speed on the highway back to the city. Reed was no longer just a successful man with no ties. He was an uncle, perhaps the only living relative Josie had besides her mother. The responsibility of that thought was both frightening and comforting, as if, finally, his life had a purpose beyond accumulating professional successes. The road stretched out before him, and for the first time in a long time, Reed Silas knew exactly where he was going. Reed parked his car in front of the small apartment building. The address Martha had reluctantly provided was in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, nothing like the luxury condos he was used to frequenting. He looked at the passenger seat, where a package wrapped in colorful paper rested. A gift for Josie, a set of children's books he had personally chosen after hours of researching the most recommended for her age. There was also a small bouquet of flowers, nothing extravagant, just simple tulips, for Eleanor. Reed's heart pounded as he climbed the stairs to the third floor. Apartment 307. He stopped in front of the door, hesitant. What if Eleanor didn't want to see him? What if she considered his presence an intrusion? He took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Quick! Light footsteps approached the door, followed by an excited, childish voice. "Mommy? Someone's at the door." Reed heard the sound of a chain being removed, a key turning. The door opened. Josie appeared first, her bright eyes widening in instant recognition. "Mr. and Reed!" She jumped with excitement. Behind her, a young woman with dark hair and delicate features appeared. Elena. The same one from the portrait, though with more tired features, subtle dark circles under her eyes. "You must be Mr. Silas," she said, her voice calm, restrained. "Josie has been talking a lot about you." And then her eyes truly saw him. The color drained from her face. Her hands reached for the doorframe for support. "My God," she whispered. Reed gave a small, uncomfortable smile. "I know this must be a shock." Eleanor continued to stare at him, as if seeing a ghost. You have Joel's face, even the way you walk." "May I come in? I'd like to talk." Elena seemed to snap out of a trance. "Of course, please." She opened the door wider, letting him pass. "Sorry for the surprise. Josie told me you looked like Joel, but there's no way to adequately describe it," Reed completed, understanding perfectly. "I brought a gift for Josie," he said, handing her the package. "And these are for you." He offered the tulips. Eleanor accepted the flowers with a shy smile. "Thank you, you didn't have to." "Can I open it now, Mommy?" Josie was already shaking the package, trying to guess its contents. "Of course, sweetie." Reed observed the small apartment, while Josie enthusiastically tore the wrapping paper. The place was simple but cozy. A combined living room and kitchen, 2 bedrooms visible through ajar doors. The walls needed painting. The sofa showed signs of wear, but everything was impeccably clean and organized. Small personal touches were everywhere. Josie's drawings on the walls, a colorful blanket on the sofa, plants in makeshift pots, photos in simple frames, including one of Joel in a prominent position on the bookshelf. "Books!" Josie exclaimed, delighted with the gift. "Look, Mommy, there's one about dragons and another about a girl who goes to the moon. They're beautiful, sweetie. What do you say to Mr. Reed?" "Thank you." Josie hugged the books to her chest. "I'm going to read them all today." Elena smiled. "Maybe not all at once. Why don't you go show them to Hippo? He'll love them." Josie nodded and ran to her room, talking excitedly to an imaginary friend or perhaps a stuffed animal. An uncomfortable silence hung between the adults. "Coffee?" Eleanor offered. "That would be great." Reed sat at the small kitchen table while Elena prepared the coffee. He watched her efficient movements, the way she kept her back straight even though her body betrayed her exhaustion. "Martha told me you work 2 jobs, Reed commented. Elena nodded, without turning around. "At an accounting office during the day. At Gino's restaurant 3 nights a week. The bills don't pay themselves. It must be hard. We do what we have to." She placed 2 cups on the table and sat down. "But you didn't come here to talk about my work schedule." Reed appreciated her directness. "No, I came because I believe Joel was my brother, possibly my twin brother." Eleanor showed no surprise. "I figured something like that. Share the resemblances." She took a deep breath. "It's uncanny. It's like he's come back." "Did you know he had a brother?" She shook her head. "Joel was raised only by his mother, Nora. He never mentioned a brother, let alone a twin, but it makes sense now." "How so?" "He always had this feeling, like a part of him was missing. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night, restless. He'd say he dreamed of someone he couldn't reach." She smiled sadly. "I thought it was just a part of his personality. Now I wonder if it wasn't something more." Reed felt a shiver. How many nights had he woken up with the same feeling? How many times had he felt that something was missing, without ever understanding what? "I need to find Nora," Reed said. "She must have the answers." Eleanor bit her lip. Nora moved away after Joel passed. It was too much for her. "We lost touch." Reed felt his frustration grow. Another dead end. "But I have her sister's address. In Carson City. Maybe she knows where Nora is now." A spark of hope. "Could you give me that address?" Elena nodded. "Of course, but..." She hesitated. "What?" "Joel was a wonderful man. The best father Josie could have had. If you're looking for answers about your past, I hope you understand that you're meddling with her present too. Reed understood the implicit message. Don't hurt my daughter. Don't come into our lives just to disappear later. I have no intention of causing more pain, he assured her. I just want to understand who I am, and to meet the family I never knew I had. Just then, Josie came running back into the room. Mommy, Hippo wants Mr. Reed to read the dragon book to us. Can he? Elena looked at Reed questioningly. It would be an honor, he replied sincerely. Reed didn't plan to start visiting Elena and Josie's home. It happened naturally. First, calls asking if he could visit again. Then, an invitation for Sunday dinner. Soon, he was stopping by 2 or 3 times a week. Each visit revealed more about Josie and Elena's world. A world so different from his, and yet strangely familiar, as if a part of him had always belonged there. On a Tuesday, he arrived after work to find Eleanor dealing with a crisis at the kitchen sink. The plumbing is old, she explained, frustrated, as she tried to tighten a connection with a wrench. The landlord has been promising to fix it for months. Reed took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Can I try? Elena handed him the tool, surprised. You know about plumbing? I worked in construction during college. He smiled at her expression. I wasn't always a man in a suit. While Reed fixed the sink, Josie approached with her sketchbook. Want to see the dragon I drew today? Of course I do. Reed watched attentively as she turned the worn pages of the sketchbook. The pencils she used were small, some almost impossible for adult hands to hold. Still, her drawings were vibrant, full of imagination. That's the best dragon I've ever seen, he commented sincerely. Her face lit up at the compliment. Daddy used to draw dragons for me too. The mention of Joel no longer hurt as much. It was becoming a constant, almost comfortable presence. Reed began to feel like he was getting to know his brother through his daughter's eyes. The following week, he brought a set of professional colored pencils and a new sketchbook. Artists need good tools, he said, seeing Elena's hesitation. It's too expensive, she protested quietly. It's just a gift, Reed insisted. It's nothing. But for Josie, it was everything. Her eyes sparkled as she saw the dozens of available colors. Over time, Reed began to notice the small needs that Elena never mentioned. The refrigerator that made too much noise, the shower with weak pressure, the faded curtains, Josie's school uniform that was getting too small. Gradually, without fanfare, he began to help. A repair here, a gift there, always discreet, always respecting Elena's pride, who accepted practical help but refused money. The reading nights became a ritual. Reed would sit on the edge of Josie's bed, a book open between them. Sometimes she would fall asleep in the middle of the story, her breathing soft and regular. In those moments, Reed would stay a few minutes longer, just watching, feeling a peace he had never experienced before. You don't have to do this, Elena said one night, as he finished washing the dinner dishes. Do what? All of this, the visits, the gifts, the time you spend with her. Reed dried his hands on the dish towel. I'm not doing it out of obligation, if that's what you're thinking. Elena studied him for a moment. I know you're not. That's what scares me. Why? Because Josie is already attached to you. If one day you decide you've found what you needed to know about Joel and move on, it will leave an even bigger hole. Reed felt the weight of those words. I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor. Everyone says that, until they go. Her voice was soft, but laden with experience. Joel never planned to leave. But he left. I can't promise that nothing will happen to me, Reed said carefully, but I can promise that as long as it's up to me, I will be a part of your lives. Josie is my niece, my family. Eleanor nodded, her eyes moist. She asked yesterday if you could come to her school play next week. It will be the first time she's been on a stage since the accident. I'll be in the front row, Reed guaranteed. A month after his first visit, Reed watched Josie playing on the small living room rug, completely absorbed in creating a city with building blocks he had brought. Eleanor was in the bedroom, resting after a particularly exhausting week. The apartment no longer felt so strange. He knew every corner, every creak of the floor. He knew Elena's routine, Josie's preferences, the problems they faced. He looked at the photos on the bookshelf. Joel smiled from one of them, hugging Elena, with a baby Josie in his arms. A complete family. There was a space next to that photo, an empty space like the one Joel left in their lives. Reed realized then what was happening. Slowly, imperceptibly, he was stepping into that space. Not to replace, no one could replace Joel, but to support, to be a presence, a support, a pillar for Josie, who needed someone to ask about her day, to read stories, to applaud her drawings. For Elena, who had been carrying everything alone since Joel was gone. The bills, the worries, the weight of raising a child without the partner she had chosen for life. Reed had never been needed before. His life was made of transactions, not connections, of business, not people. But here, in this small apartment, with its peeling walls and its indescribable warmth, he was needed. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. Saturday dawned with a light rain, the kind that invites you to stay home. Reed arrived at Elena's apartment with grocery bags, ingredients for pancakes and hot chocolate. "Special breakfast," he announced, as Josie jumped around him, excited by the idea. Elena smiled, still sleepy in her robe. "You're going to cook." "We're all going to cook," Reed corrected. "Especially my sous chef here." Josie took on the role seriously. Wearing an apron, Elena improvised from a towel. The small kitchen was soon filled with laughter and flour scattered on the counter. While they ate the pancakes, some perfect, others decidedly not, Reed realized how precious these simple moments had become to him. In just a few weeks, his life had changed completely. The business meetings, the dinners at expensive restaurants, the international trips, it all seemed to belong to another life, another person. "Can I show my special treasure to Uncle Reed, Mommy?" Josie asked, after meticulously cleaning her plate. Elena hesitated for a moment. "So of course, sweetie." Josie ran to her room and returned carrying a shoebox decorated with colorful stickers and glitter. She sat next to Reed on the sofa and opened the lid with reverent care. "This is where I keep the most important things in the world," she explained, with the seriousness only children can muster for solemn matters. Inside the box was an eclectic collection: seashells, colored rocks, a butterfly-shaped brooch, some hair ribbons, a small worn-out plastic dinosaur, and an envelope with photographs. "These are my favorite pictures of Daddy," Josie said, taking the photos out of the envelope. Reed felt a lump in his throat. It was like looking at his own life in photos he never took. Joel smiling in front of a Christmas tree. Joel holding baby Josie. Joel with a ridiculous birthday hat making a face at the camera. "He always made us laugh," Josie commented, running her finger over her father's image. "Even when he was tired." Reed observed every detail, absorbing information about the brother he never knew. The way Joel tilted his head slightly when he smiled, the way his eyes, so much like Reed's, crinkled at the corners when he laughed. One photo in particular caught his eye. A younger Joel, maybe 17 or 18, next to a middle-aged woman. Both were smiling in front of a modest house. "Who is that with your dad?" Reed asked, pointing to the woman. "That's Grandma Nora," Josie replied, picking up the photo to look closer. "But we haven't seen her in a long time." Reed felt his heart race. Nora, his biological mother. The woman who, for some unknown reason, had separated her children, keeping one and giving the other up for adoption. "She seems nice," he commented, trying to keep his voice casual. "She makes the best cookies ever," Josie stated. "And she has a garden full of colorful flowers. She used to let me help water them." Eleanor approached, sitting in the armchair opposite them. Her gaze met Reed's, understanding the significance of that moment. "Why don't you visit Grandma Nora anymore?" Reed asked, carefully. Josie shrugged, already distracted by another photo. Elena took a deep breath before answering. "After Joel was gone, we lost touch. Life got hard." There was more in that simple sentence than Elena was saying. Reed could feel it. "Josie, sweetie," Elena said, "how about you put your treasure away and watch a little bit of cartoons while Uncle Reed and I talk?" Josie nodded, carefully putting her precious items back in the box. "Can I watch Frozen?" Of course. When Josie was settled in front of the small TV in her room, Eleanor returned and sat next to Reed. Nora lives nearby, actually, she explained in a low voice. In Mapleton Gardens, a quiet residential neighborhood about 20 minutes from here. So close, Reed was surprised. Why don't you keep in touch? Elena looked at her hands. It's complicated. Nora has always been very independent. When Joel and I got married, she gave us space to form our own family. She visited often, but she kept her own life. And after the accident? She was very present at first, Elena continued. But I think the pain was too much for her. Seeing Josie, who has so much of Joel, she paused. Gradually, the visits became less frequent. I believe it's her way of dealing with the grief. Reed absorbed the information. A woman who lost a son and now perhaps didn't know how to stay present without the pain consuming her. Do you have her address? Reed asked. Elena nodded. I do. I sometimes send cards on special occasions, pictures of Josie. She responds with small gifts for Josie, but never schedules visits. Do you think she would want to see me? Eleanor considered the question for a moment. Honestly, I think it would be a shock for her. But maybe it's exactly what she needs to move on. Reed was silent for a moment, thinking. Meeting Nora meant possibly finding answers to the questions that had tormented him since he found out about Joel. Why were they separated? Why was he given up for adoption? What had happened? But now, there was more than curiosity. There was Josie, who spoke of her grandmother with affection. There was Elena, overwhelmed with responsibilities. And there was Nora herself, a woman who had lost her son and seemed to be isolating herself in her grief. I need to find her, he said finally. Elena studied him. Why? To get answers? Yes, partly. Reed looked at the ajar bedroom door, where he could see Josie absorbed in the movie. But also because she's Josie's grandmother, because Joel loved her. And because, he hesitated, she's my mother too. The reality of those words hit him as he said them. His mother, a woman he had never met, who for unknown reasons had given him up, but who had raised his brother with apparent love and dedication. I have her address, Elena offered. I can give it to you if you want. I want it, Reed confirmed. But first, tell me more about Joel. Who was he really? Elena smiled, her eyes softening with memories. Joel was light. Pure light. He worked as a mechanic at Mr. Guzman's shop, but he was studying at night to be an electrical technician. He dreamed of having his own business one day. Reed listened, imagining the life his brother had built. So different from his, and yet with the same impulses to work hard, to build something. He faced every possible hardship, Elena continued. He grew up without a father, with few resources, but he never lost his kindness. He never became bitter. When Josie was born, her voice faltered a bit. You should have seen the way he looked at her, as if he held the entire universe in his arms. Reed felt a mix of pride and loss, pride for the man his brother had become, loss for never having known him. I'm going to find Nora, he decided, not as a businessman curious about his past, but as a son who wants to know his mother. As an uncle who wants to reconnect his niece with her grandmother. Elena nodded, understanding. From the room came Josie's voice singing along with the movie, carefree and happy. Joel would be happy to know you found her, Elena said softly. That you're here, being a part of her life. Reed looked again at the photo of Joel and Nora. Two people he had never met, but who were now part of who he was. Me too, he replied simply. Reed parked in front of number 247 Maple Street in Mapleton Gardens. The house was small and simple, with a front garden that had seen better days. The flowers Josie had mentioned were there, but they seemed to lack care. A few wilted petals scattered on the lawn suggested recent neglect. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. All his life, he had imagined what this meeting would be like, if it would ever happen at all. Now, on the other side of that modest door, was the woman who brought him into the world and, for reasons he still didn't understand, had given him away. He walked along the small path of irregular stones to the porch. The paint on the door was peeling, and one of the windows had a small crack in the glass. Everything pointed to a house inhabited by someone who had lost interest in maintenance. He rang the doorbell. There was no immediate response. He tried again, this time hearing slow footsteps approaching. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman with grey hair tied in a loose bun. She looked to be in her early 60s, but the lines around her eyes and her stooped posture suggested that life had taken its toll. She wore a faded blue cardigan over a simple blouse. When her eyes met Reed's, she froze, the color completely drained from her face. Her hands trembled, reaching for the doorframe for support. "My God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm Reed," he said softly. "Reed Silas." Tears began to stream down Nora's face before she could even articulate a response. Her legs seemed to give way, and Reed instinctively reached out to support her. You're the other one," she managed to say between sobs. "I never thought I'd see you." Reed helped her sit in the rocking chair on the porch, kneeling beside her. The resemblance in their eyes was undeniable, the same bright eyes Josie had inherited from Joel. "I found out about Joel," Reed said gently, "and about Josie." Upon hearing her son's name, Nora broke down in more intense tears. "My boy, my Joel. I'm so sorry for your loss." Nora looked at him through her tears, studying every feature of his face. "It's as if he's here. Were exactly alike. May I come in? I'd really like to talk." Nora nodded, drying her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. Of course. Forgive the mess. I haven't had visitors in a long time." The inside of the house confirmed the external impression. It was clean, but revealed neglect. Piles of unopened mail on the kitchen table, dishes in the sink, closed curtains that blocked out natural light. The air was stuffy, like a place that had been closed up for too long. Nora led him to the small living room, where photographs of Joel dominated every available surface. Baby Joel, child Joel, adult Joel with Elena and Josie. A life documented in detail by a loving mother. "Do you want coffee or water?" Nora offered nervously. "Don't worry about me. Please, sit down." They settled on the worn-out sofa. Nora kept her hands clasped in her lap, as if trying to control herself. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Through Josie. I met her at the daycare where I made a donation. She said I looked like her father." Nora smiled through her tears. "My little granddaughter. How is she?" "She's an amazing girl. Smart, affectionate. She misses you very much." Guilt crossed Nora's face like a shadow. "I know I should visit them more. It's just that seeing her is like seeing Joel as a child. It hurts too much." Reed understood. "Elena told me you pulled away after the accident. I couldn't bear it," Nora admitted. "Losing Joel was like losing half of myself. And then, looking at Josie, she has his eyes, his smile. Every time I saw her, it was like losing him all over again." Reed felt a deep compassion for this woman broken by grief. "But by isolating yourself, you're missing the chance to keep Joel alive through her." Nora stared at him, surprised by the wisdom of his words. "Now I need to understand something," Reed continued, carefully. "About me, about why I was given up for adoption." Nora closed her eyes, as if gathering courage for a confession she had carried for decades. "I was 19 when you were born," she began, her voice trembling. "It was 1987. I was alone, with no money, no family. Your father, he disappeared when he found out I was pregnant." Reed listened in silence, without judgment. "The pregnancy was difficult. When you were born, you were premature, small, fragile. The doctors weren't sure if you would both survive." She got up and went to an old dresser, from which she took a shoebox similar to the one Josie kept her treasures in. "I kept a few things," she said, returning with the box. Inside were two tiny, identical hospital identification bracelets. A birth certificate with two names, Joel Henry and Baby Doe. A blurry photo of two tiny babies in incubators. "You were in the hospital for weeks. I slept in the hallway with nowhere to go. I had no money for an apartment, decent food, nothing that two babies would need." Reed held the photo, looking at the two small beings he and Joel had been. "A nurse told me about adoption. She said there were families waiting, people who could give you what I couldn't." Nora wiped away fresh tears. For weeks, I fought with myself. How could I choose? How could I decide which son to keep and which to give away? The anguish in her voice was palpable, decades later. Then Joel got stronger first. He gained weight, cried louder, seemed more resilient. You were still fragile, needing more medical care. She looked directly at Reed. The decision was made for me by life. I would keep the one who seemed to have a better chance of surviving with few resources. Reed felt a lump in his throat, not of resentment, but of deep understanding. The night I took you to the orphanage, Nora continued, I cried more than I ever had in my life. You were sleeping, wrapped in the only good blanket I had. I put a letter with your name and date of birth in with you, but then I took it out. I thought it would be easier for the adoptive family to give you a fresh start, without my past. You did what you thought was best, Reed said, surprised by the lack of resentment in his own voice. It was an impossible situation. Nora stared at him in astonishment. You're not angry? No. The answer came naturally. You were practically a child yourself, facing a choice no mother should ever have to make, and you gave me the chance to grow up with a family that loved me. Nora's tears intensified, but now they seemed to be tears of relief. Every day I thought of you. I wondered if you were okay, if you were happy, if the family that adopted you loved you. She touched his face hesitantly, as if not believing he was real. You've grown into such a handsome man. I can see you've had a good life. I have, but I always felt like something was missing. Now I know what it was. Reed looked around the house again, noticing details he had missed initially. Medications on the kitchen table, piled up medical bills, a calendar on the wall with appointments marked, several of them crossed out as if they had been missed. Nora, are you okay? Are you taking care of your health? She hesitated, looking away. I've been having some memory lapses. The doctor said it might be the beginning of Alzheimer's. Reed felt the world stop for a moment. He had just found his biological mother only to discover he might lose her again. Are you getting treatment? When I can afford the appointments, she admitted, ashamed. Sometimes I forget the appointments. Other times, I just don't have the money. Reed looked at the woman before him, his mother who had sacrificed so much, who had lost a son, and who was now facing a devastating illness alone. The decision formed in his mind with crystalline clarity. You're not going to live here anymore, he said, firm but gentle. Nora stared at him, confused. What? You're going to live with me. I'll take care of you. Provide the best medical treatment. You don't deserve to keep facing this alone. I can't accept, Nora protested. You barely know me. I can't be a burden to you. You are my mother, Reed interrupted, and I have more than enough resources to take care of you properly. Besides, he smiled, Josie needs her grandmother. Nora covered her face with her hands, sobbing, I don't deserve your kindness. Everyone deserves love and care, especially when they're facing hardship. Reed stood up and knelt before her, holding her hands. Let me do this. Let me take care of you like you took care of Joel. Like a family should. Nora looked at him through her tears, seeing in his face not just Joel, but something unique, a kindness that had been cultivated by a life of privilege transformed into responsibility. Do you really want this? She asked, vulnerably. I want it more than any deal I've ever closed. 3 weeks later, Reed watched Nora in the kitchen of his spacious apartment, baking cookies for Josie's visit that afternoon. She still moved hesitantly in the new space, but the first signs of improvement were evident. The apartment had been transformed. Reed had hired a decorator to make the space more welcoming, but it was Nora who brought it to life. Plants in the windows, family photographs on the walls, the smell of home-cooked food. The doctors are optimistic, Reed reported over the phone to Elena. Early treatment can significantly slow the progression, and having a routine, a purpose, family around, all of it helps. How is she adjusting? Reed looked at Nora, who was humming as she worked. Better than I expected. Yesterday she taught me how to make the bread Joel liked. Today she's looking forward to seeing Josie. And you? How are you feeling? Reed reflected on the question. His life had changed completely in a matter of months. The apartment was full of life. He had a mother to care for, a niece to love, a new family to protect. Complete, he finally answered. For the first time in my life, I feel complete. When Josie arrived that afternoon, she ran directly into Nora's arms. Grandma, you made cookies. Your favorites, my dear. Reed watched the scene from the kitchen doorway. Nora and Josie hugging, Elena smiling as she set the table, the sound of laughter echoing through the apartment. The void Joel had left hadn't completely disappeared. Maybe it never would. But it was being filled in a different way, not with a replacement, but with restored love, rebuilt affections, a family finding its way back to wholeness. Reed thought of the brother he never knew and whispered a silent promise. I'll take care of them, Joel. All of them. At the kitchen table, surrounded by his new family, Reed Silas discovered that life wasn't about accumulating success or wealth. It was about being present for the people we love, especially when they need it most. And for the first time since he could remember, he knew exactly where he belonged. Green Hill Cemetery was quiet on Saturday morning. Reed walked along the paved paths between the headstones, carrying a small bouquet of yellow flowers, Joel's favorite, according to Elena. The sun filtered through the treetops, creating patterns of light and shadow on the well-kept lawn. It had taken him 2 months to gather the courage for this visit, 2 months since he found Nora, since his life had completely transformed. Now he felt it was time to truly meet his brother, even if only through a one-sided conversation in front of a cold stone. The headstone was simple, as Reed imagined Joel would have chosen. Grey granite with discreet inscriptions. Joel Henry Silas, 1987-2024. Beloved son, husband, and father, your light lives on in our hearts. Reed stood for a long moment, just observing. The engraved words seemed inadequate to contain an entire life, all the unfulfilled dreams, all the jokes Joel would no longer tell, all the hugs Josie would not receive. He placed the flowers in a small vase next to the headstone and sat on the damp grass, not caring that his expensive suit might get dirty. Hi, Joel, he began, feeling strange talking to himself in the silence of the cemetery. I'm Reed, your brother. A gentle breeze moved the leaves of the nearby trees, as if nature were listening. I know this must sound crazy. I mean, you probably didn't even know I existed, right? I didn't know about you either. Reed took a deep breath, finding the words. But I found out through Josie. Man, what an incredible girl you raised. Reed looked up at the blue sky, wondering if somehow Joel could hear him. She has your eyes, you know. And that way she tilts her head when she's thinking about something important. Eleanor showed me pictures of you, and it's scary how much we looked alike. He chuckled softly. I guess we really are twins. An elderly couple walked by in the cemetery, talking in low voices. Reed waited for them to move away before continuing. I wanted you to know that I found our mother, Nora. She's living with me now. Reed's voice grew firmer. She told me about when we were born. It was an impossible situation, Joel. She was just a kid. No money, no support. She had to choose between us. Reed plucked a few blades of grass, rolling them between his fingers. I don't hold any resentment against her. In fact, I admire the courage she had. And she raised you well, man. From the way Josie talks about you, the way Elena lights up when she tells stories, you were an incredible man. The words began to flow more easily, as if an emotional dam had broken. You know, my whole life has been about control, about building a company, making money, closing deals. I had everything planned, everything measured, everything calculated. Reed took his gold pen from his inner jacket pocket, a Mont Blanc he had received when he closed his first major contract. This pen here, it signed multi-million-dollar contracts. It was my symbol of success. He twirled the pen between his fingers, watching how it reflected the sunlight. But when I met Josie, when she showed me that drawing, everything changed. I realized I had built an empty life. Rich, but empty. Reed smiled, remembering Josie's first genuine smile. She taught me that there are more important things than money. That family isn't about DNA, it's about being present. A yellow butterfly landed briefly on the headstone before flying away. Reed chose to see it as a sign. I didn't know you existed, Joel, but now I'm here, and I'm going to take care of your girl." His voice grew more intense, filled with determination. "They are everything I didn't know was missing." Reed stood up, smoothed out his suit, and walked until he was right next to the headstone. "I want you to know that Josie talks about you every day. She tells your bad jokes to Nora." He laughed. "By the way, your mom is doing better. The treatment is helping, and having family around has made a huge difference." Reed gently touched the top of the headstone, feeling the cold texture of the granite. "Elena is doing well too. She still works hard, but now she has support. She doesn't have to carry everything alone." He paused. "She's an incredible woman, Joel. I can see why you fell in love with her. And Josie. She's a perfect mix of you both." The cemetery remained silent, but Reed didn't feel alone. It was as if a calm presence enveloped him, a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I'm going to teach her to ride a bike, like you planned. I'll be at her school plays. I'll read her stories to sleep." Reed's voice trembled slightly. "I'm going to try to be half the father you were." Reed held the gold pen for a final moment, thinking of all the important signatures it had made, all the deals it had closed. Then, carefully, he placed it on Joel's headstone. "This represented my old life, a life of control, of calculations, of emotional distance." He took a step back. "I don't need it anymore. I've learned that the most important things in life can't be controlled or planned. They just happen." A cloud passed over the sun, creating a temporary shadow before the light returned, brighter. "I promise I will protect your family, Joel. Our family." Reed took a deep breath. "And I promise I will always talk about you to Josie. That she will grow up knowing what an incredible man her father was." Reed stood for a few more minutes in silence, just absorbing the moment. Then, softly, he said, "See you later, brother. I'll see you around." As he walked back through the cemetery, Reed felt something different. It wasn't the closure he expected, but rather an opening. A connection that transcended death. A bridge between two lives that never physically crossed, but were now eternally linked through the shared love for a girl with bright eyes. In the car, before starting the engine, Reed looked back one last time. The golden pen shone on the granite headstone, a symbol of transformation left behind. He drove back home, to Nora preparing lunch, to Josie waiting for him to help with a puzzle, to Elena who would come for dinner later, to a life that finally made sense. Reed Silas had found his brother through death, but more importantly, he had found himself through life. And he knew that Joel, wherever he was, would approve of the family they had built together. 3 days after his visit to Joel's grave, Reed found himself sitting on his apartment balcony, watching the city move at dusk. He didn't miss the gold pen he had left on his brother's headstone. On the contrary, he felt lighter without it, as if he had left behind not just an object of ours, but an old version of himself who lived only for work. Nora was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming a tune that Joel used to whistle, a habit she had resumed after moving into the apartment. The space had completely transformed since her arrival. Green plants in the windows, smiling photographs on the walls, the constant smell of home-cooked food in the air, small personal objects that made the place a truly welcoming home. Eleanor arrived promptly at 6 in the evening, as had become routine in recent months. She held Josie's hand, who immediately ran to hug Reed with the characteristic enthusiasm of a 5-year-old seeing someone special. "Uncle Reed, look what I made in school today," she exclaimed, pulling a colorful drawing from her small backpack, still slightly damp with paint. Reed examined the work with genuine attention, as he had learned to do. It was a family in front of a house, all smiling under a radiant sun with bright yellow rays. He immediately recognized the figures: Elena with her long, dark hair, little Josie beside her with her characteristic braids, Nora with her gray hair in a bun, and an ethereal figure in the sky with a gleaming golden halo, Joel, watching from above with a protective smile. "It's beautiful, Josie. Who are all these special people?" "Our family," she replied with absolute naturalness. "Mommy, me, Grandma Nora, and Daddy in heaven looking after us." Reed noticed there were only 4 figures in the drawing. He wasn't included. Dale Smaller's unexpected pang in his chest made him realize how accustomed he had become to being part of that core, how his identity was now intertwined with these people. "I'm going to show Grandma," Josie said, running to the kitchen with the tireless energy that characterized her afternoons. Eleanor sat next to Reed on the comfortable balcony, watching her daughter disappear through the door. Reed noticed the subtle lines of fatigue around her eyes, marks he had learned to recognize after months of being together. "How was work today?" Reed asked, his genuine concern showing in his voice. "Tiring. The restaurant was packed last night, and the double shift was harder than usual." Eleanor sighed deeply, massaging her temples with circular motions. "But I'm fine. I always manage." Reed watched her for a moment, noticing how even after months of close proximity, Elena maintained this posture of an unshakable fortress, as if admitting weakness or fatigue was an unacceptable failure. "Elena, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, go ahead." "Why do you never ask for help? Even when it's obvious to everyone around you that you're overwhelmed." She laughed softly, but there was no real humor in the sound. It was more of a defense mechanism. "I guess I learned not to expect someone to show up and solve my problems. After Joel was gone, it was just me and Josie against the world. But it's not just the two of you anymore." Elena looked at him, something deeply vulnerable in her gaze, as if she were considering for the first time the possibility of sharing the weight she carried. "I know. It's strange, actually. I've been carrying everything alone for so long that sometimes I forget I can share the burden with someone." Nora appeared at the door, drying her hands on the floral apron Reed had bought for her. "Dinner is almost ready. Can you two wash your hands? I made that risotto Josie loves." During dinner, Reed observed the family dynamic that had developed naturally over the months. Josie excitedly talked about her art class, gesturing with her fork as she described painting a rainbow with every color imaginable. Nora shared precious stories from Joel's youth, details that painted a portrait of a determined and dreamy young man. Elena listened with a smile that reached her eyes. Something Reed noticed was happening more and more often. "Uncle Reed," Josie said as she played with the last grains of rice on her plate, "did you know my daddy was afraid of clowns?" "Really?" Reed feigned exaggerated surprise, making Josie laugh. "Anything else?" "Cockroaches." Josie laughed loudly, covering her mouth with her small hand. "Mommy had to kill them when one showed up in the old apartment." Elena blushed slightly, smiling with affectionate embarrassment. "He was very brave about everything in life, except for small insects. And he used to sing in the shower," Nora added, her eyes shining with the memory. "Always the same song, Imagine, by John Lennon. Every morning, religiously." Reed carefully absorbed every detail, mentally building the complex portrait of a man he had never met physically, but who became more real and tangible with every story shared by the family. After dinner, while Nora and Josie settled in the living room to watch a cartoon, Reed and Elena washed the dishes together in the kitchen. The silent ritual had become comforting. He washed meticulously. She dried carefully, talking about the day's trivialities in a domestic intimacy Reed had never experienced before. "Eleanor," Reed began, hesitant, organizing the words in his mind. "I've been thinking about something for a while, something important." "What is it?" "About you two. About the financial situation, about all the weight you carry on your shoulders every day." Elena stopped drying the plate in her hands, her muscles visibly tensing. "Reed, please, let me finish." He turned to face her completely, water dripping from his hands. "I've been watching you these past few months. How you work tirelessly at 2 jobs, how you worry about every bill that comes, how you sometimes stay up at night. I know you're calculating expenses. I can handle it. I know you can handle it. I have no doubt about your ability or strength." Reed took a deep breath, knowing the next words would change everything. "But it's not about your ability to handle it alone. It's about not having to handle it alone anymore." Elena looked at him, something between hope and fear in her eyes. "I want you to know that you two will no longer have to worry about anything," Reed said, his voice firm and filled with absolute determination. "Josie will have everything she needs, the best private school, music lessons if she shows interest, dance, art, any activity that sparks her curiosity. College, graduate school, trips around the world if she dreams of it, and you too, Elena. You can stop working at night if you want. You can go back to school. You can follow your own dreams that were put on hold. You can just breathe without worrying about money. I promise." The plate slipped from Eleanor's hands, clattering into the sink with a dry sound that echoed through the kitchen. Her hands were visibly trembling, and Reed saw tears forming in her eyes. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not charity," Reed interrupted gently but firmly. "It's family taking care of family. Josie is my niece, my blood. You are part of my life now, part of this family we've built together. I have more than enough resources to take care of you, and it would be not only a pleasure but an honor to be able to do so." Elena began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face, carrying years of accumulated tension and worry. "You don't understand what this means. For so long I felt like I'm slowly sinking, trying to keep everything running with tape and hope. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, panicking, thinking about how I'm going to pay next month's bills." Reed hugged her as she sobbed quietly, feeling her body tremble with the relief of finally being able to share this burden she had carried alone for so long. "You came when we needed you most," she managed to say between tears, her voice broken with emotion. "When I was really at my limit, not knowing how to keep pretending everything was okay. Thank you for not leaving when you saw how complicated our situation really was." "I will never leave," Reed said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. "This is my family now, forever." They held each other for several minutes, the distant sound of the TV in the living room serving as a comforting soundtrack to this moment of deep, transformative connection. When Elena finally calmed down, drying her eyes with the dish towel, they returned to the living room. Josie was lying on the soft rug, drawing on a new piece of paper with her colored pencils, with Nora sitting in the nearby armchair, knitting a pink scarf. "What are you doing there, little artist?" Elena asked, sitting on the floor next to her daughter. "A special drawing," Josie replied, focused on her work, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. Reed joined them on the floor, curious about this new creation. The drawing was completely different from the previous one, more detailed, more careful, made with greater attention to detail. This time, there were 5 clearly defined figures in front of the same happy house: Elena, Josie, Nora, the ethereal figure of Joel in the sky with his golden halo, and Reed. But it wasn't just his presence that caught the eye. Josie had drawn Reed in the center of the family group, and on his chest, colored with special care and several layers of red crayon, was a large, shining heart. "Now you're part of our family," Josie said with absolute solemnity, handing the drawing to Reed as if it were an official adoption document. Reed took the paper with careful hands, as if it were the most precious and fragile object in the world. He looked at the drawing for a long moment in silence, seeing not just the colorful crayon figures, but understanding the deep symbolism of what Josie had unconsciously created. She had placed him at the center, not as a substitute for Joel, but as a new, essential piece that completed the family's emotional puzzle. Elena watched his reaction attentively, fresh tears shining in her eyes. Nora had completely stopped knitting and was looking on with an emotional smile that lit up her entire face. Reed hugged the paper to his chest in absolute silence, unable to find adequate words to express the magnitude of what he felt in that moment. Being accepted by a 5-year-old child as an integral part of her family was, in some inexplicable way, more significant than any professional achievement he had ever attained. Thank you, Josie," he managed to say finally, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. "It's the most beautiful and important gift I've ever received in my entire life." Josie smiled with pure satisfaction, clearly proud of the reaction she had provoked. "Can I put it on the fridge for everyone to see?" "Of course you can. In fact, I'm going to buy a special frame for it." She ran to the kitchen with characteristic energy, and Reed heard the familiar sound of tape being unrolled. When she returned a few minutes later, she had a proud and accomplished smile on her face. "There. Now everyone who comes here will know we're a real family." The rest of the evening passed in a comforting and warm calm. Josie showed Reed her favorite book about a brave princess, insisted he read with different voices for each character, then gradually fell asleep on the sofa between him and Elena. When the inevitable time came for Elena and Josie to leave, Reed felt the familiar reluctance he experienced every time they departed. "Elena," he said as she put a sleepy Josie in the car, "how about you two come for lunch here on Sunday? I can try to cook something special." "You cook?" she asked, genuinely amused. "I'm learning from Nora." "I'm not good yet, but I'm very enthusiastic." Elena laughed genuinely. "We'd love to come. Josie will be thrilled." The following Sunday, Reed woke up early and spent the entire morning in the kitchen with Nora, patiently learning to make the handmade pasta she said was Josie's favorite dish. His hands, so used to holding elegant pens and shaking hands in meetings, were clumsy with the sticky dough. "You're getting better with every try," Nora encouraged. "Your optimism isn't very convincing," Reed laughed. Joel was terrible in the kitchen at first too. He burned 3 pans trying to make scrambled eggs. Elena and Josie arrived promptly at noon, bringing homemade dessert and colorful flowers. The table was carefully set with what Reed considered his best attempt at creating a homely atmosphere, matching napkins, lit candles, soft music. During the lively lunch, Josie shared that she had told a friend from school about her Uncle Reed, who appeared from the sky just as Daddy went to the sky. "She said that's pure magic," Josie reported seriously. "Maybe it is magic," Elena said, looking at Reed with a special smile. After lunch, while Elena and Nora cleared the kitchen, Reed called Josie to the balcony. "Josie, can I show you something very special?" She nodded vigorously. Reed led her to the small outdoor space, where he had left a surprise covered by a white sheet. With a theatrical flourish, he pulled off the fabric, revealing a small, vibrant pink bicycle, decorated with fluttering, colorful ribbons on the handlebars and a small wicker basket in the front. Josie's eyes widened in astonishment. "Is it really mine?" "It's all yours. I thought it might be the perfect time to learn how to ride a bike." Josie touched the bicycle with reverence. "Daddy was going to teach me when I turned 6. "I know," Reed said softly, kneeling to be at her level. "How about we learn together?" "I'll hold on to you." Josie looked at him for a long moment, her bright eyes shining with an emotion and determination that simultaneously reminded him of Joel and her own unique personality. "Do you really promise you won't let go?" "I promise I'll hold on tight until you feel completely ready to fly on your own." Eleanor and Nora appeared on the balcony. Seeing the bike, Eleanor brought her hands to her mouth, moved. "Reed, you didn't have to do this." "I really wanted to," he said simply. Josie got on the bike with Reed's help, who positioned himself behind, holding the seat and handlebars firmly. She was stiff with nervousness at first, but gradually relaxed as Reed guided her around the balcony. "Am I really riding?" she asked him, excited. "You're riding perfectly," Reed confirmed, smiling. Elena watched from the doorway, tears of happiness in her eyes. Nora stood beside her, both witnessing this special moment. After a few minutes, Josie started to laugh, a crystalline sound that echoed across the balcony. Reed laughed too, feeling a genuine happiness he had forgotten was possible. "Can I try by myself?" she asked after a few laps. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, but you'll stay close, right?" "I'll always stay close." Reed gradually loosened his grip, keeping only a supporting hand. Josie pedaled with growing determination. "Look, Mommy." "I'm flying," she shouted, her laughter filling the air. In that moment, Reed felt something fundamental complete within him. It wasn't just about teaching a child to ride a bike. It was about being present for the important moments, about creating lasting memories, about being the person Joel would have been. When Josie finally stopped, radiant, she ran to hug Reed. "Thank you for teaching me. Can I ride again tomorrow?" "You can ride whenever you want." Elena approached, her eyes moist. "Joel would be so proud," she said quietly. "I sincerely hope so," Reed replied. That afternoon, as the sun set, Reed looked around. At Nora helping Josie clean the bike, at Elena arranging the flowers, at the drawing taped to the fridge. His life had changed completely. He was no longer the lonely businessman. He was Uncle Reed, Nora's son, part of a family formed in the most unlikely way. And as he watched Josie laugh and plan her next adventures, Reed knew he had found something no money could buy: real purpose, unconditional love, and a place where he truly belonged. They laughed. And they moved forward, together as a true family. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.